All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you got some good stuff out of the Apogee session that was earlier. Right now, we're going to go into energy efficiency basics. And the reason for this today is kind of to give you just some tools to assist with high bill complaints. We're going to mainly be talking about winter stuff because that's what we're in right now. But a lot of this applies to summer high bill complaints as well. Again, I'm Connie Ford. I work in the area of member services. I've been at MPUA for, I guess, almost 6 years now. Previous to that, I worked at Columbia Water and Light, our local utility, and I did a lot of gathering of information from our integrated resource plan, the utility cost benefit of offering utility rebate programs for energy efficiency, as well as marketing those programs, doing a lot of education programs within the school system in Columbia about energy efficiency, as well as producing some how-to videos. So that's kind of my background. I'm not certified by the Building Performance Institute or anything like that, but I've had a lot of experience both in educating people about energy efficiency and then also handling those customer calls with high bill complaints. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn off my camera here for a little bit and then maybe turn it on when I have a couple other things to show you. So to start out with, sure I'm getting my screen going. There we go. A webinar overview for today. So we're really going to be talking about the main drivers of home energy use. I'm going to go just through some basics of home, what drives those high bills, mainly in heating and cooling. I'm just going to go through some basics. Some of this stuff, I know that you're not going to necessarily be giving these tips and stuff over the phone to people that call in with complaints, but at least you understand the concepts. It's not only great for your own home. In fact, I would say take some of this information, take it to your own home, apply it there so you can kind of learn and start understanding how to be more energy efficient and how you can help your customers. So that's just kind of your base knowledge. And then we'll move into tools for that you can share with your customers, how to do some outreach on energy efficiency to control those high costs. And then finally, we'll end it with a couple of sample high bill complaints that I've received over the years, go through some potential answers to those, as well as if you have some stuff that you've been stumped with as far as your customers go, how you can respond to those. So that's what the layout is for today. So to get started here are some of the common complaints that I heard that I had to address when talking to not only customers, but as we all know, when you're an employee at a local utility, that means that people come up to you at the grocery store, your friends, your family, ask you questions about their electric bills, their natural gas bills, that kind of thing. So these are just a few things that I've heard over the years that people just have some general they just don't understand all the basics of energy efficiency. And I guess when you get these questions, my advice to you is just be patient with people in the United States. Well, I don't really know about other countries, but at least here in the United States, unless you grew up during the 70s energy crisis, there hasn't been an emphasis on how to conserve energy and how to be more energy efficient. We're very fortunate that we've had low energy costs in the United States for a very long time. But it's just something that kind of once you hear, it's kind of common sense and logic, but not everyone has been exposed to that or taught during their life. So you might be the first person who's educating them on how these things work and the drivers of high bills. We'll get back to these questions again at the end, and I can give you some sample responses. But as I'm going through these, if you can kind of note any questions that you have that you're struggling with answering from your customers, we can talk about that at the end. So going right into home energy use, we can see here that most of the energy used in your home is due to heating and cooling. I'm saying energy, you might have natural gas, you might have electricity. I'm just going to use energy as the general term here, but that's going to be the biggest driver, the biggest expense to your home energy or utility bill is that heating and cooling. So that's not to say that changing out LED bulbs, that's important, but it's still only 10% of your overall, around 10% of your overall usage. So it's going to help you year round, but not really going to make a big, huge dent. Still important, but not going to make that big, huge dent. Things like water heating, that obviously can go up a lot more if you have, two or three teenagers in your house or a lot of different people taking showers and washing clothes. That water heating expense can go up. But what I'm going to talk about mainly today is ways to impact that heating and cooling and how to help your customers with that big driver of large utility bills. So some of the variables within the heating and cooling that can make that higher than 40%, go up to 50%, 60%, is not only the temperature, but then things like what's the wind speed in the winter. When it was, very windy over the Christmas holiday when we had sub-zero temperatures, that wind, even though I tried to seal up my house, I could still feel that wind, and it had an impact on how warm my house was. Humidity in the summer, a lot of times people think about, it's 100 degrees, but another layer of that is if it's 90% humidity, that air conditioner is going to have to work harder, as well as customer behavior, where they're setting their thermostat, and construction and equipment. What age your house was built, how well it was built with energy efficiency in mind, and the age of equipment. So those are all things that can impact that heating and cooling expense. So the biggest way to make a difference in your overall, energy bills is to pay attention to heating and cooling. One of the biggest things that we've been focusing on here at MPUA as far as our outreach goes, and I suggest that you repeat it ad nauseum to your temperatures or to your customers, is the impact of the temperature. People do not think about, some people do probably, but not a lot of people are sitting around thinking about the difference between the inside temperature and the outside temperature. So, your house feels colder, you're colder because it's 5 degrees outside. You have it set at 70 degrees. That's a 65-degree difference. So that's going to be a lot more expensive than when it's, 55, 60 degrees outside and you're just talking about a 10 to 15-degree difference. So that's an important thing to talk about to your customers is, it's if you want to wear shorts inside your house in the middle of the winter and you want to set it at 80 degrees, in a way, I kind of consider that as a luxury. If you don't want to pay for that wearing of shorts, then maybe you put on a pair of sweatpants for a couple days while it's zero outside, and not be tempted to raise that temperature. And then at a certain point, maybe your heating or your cooling equipment can't keep up with the temperature because there's such a huge differential in between that. So that's an important thing to remember. So these are the things I'm going to concentrate on today as far as the main ways that you're going to control heating and air conditioning use is going to fall into three buckets. One are just lifestyle changes are free. This is the whole energy conservation type things. You're actually conserving stuff. So you're not spending as much money, using as much energy. And that would be things like making sure that you're, wearing layers, you're wearing a sweater when it gets really cold outside, you're putting on some slippers instead of walking around barefoot in your house. Those type of things, lifestyle changes, are free and perfect for low income or renters that might not necessarily have the money to make upgrades to their house, or just can't do it because they're renting. Then there's also the improvements that you can make that are low cost, do it yourself projects. And these are things that most people can do quite easily. The stuff is very inexpensive and it doesn't take that much time. You can do it by yourself. And then there's things that you can really be very efficient, but I consider those more investments. That's replacing your heating and cooling, replacing your windows. Those are things that not all of your customers are going to have the financial ability to do easily. So that's kind of the way that I have my tips usually organized. And then that way you can customize it. If you get a renter, for instance, then you know that you're just going to be talking to them about lifestyle changes. So those are three basic ways of attempting that. The other thing about, not only are you going to be saving money if you're more energy efficient and especially do some of those low cost or investments, but your house is going to be a lot more comfortable. And so that's something as well. If someone just has a high bill and they're extremely uncomfortable, energy efficiency makes a lot of sense because you're just going to be more comfortable and not have to turn up that thermostat as much in the winter to stay warm. So here's the areas within the house that are important to look at and to address. Air leaks, insulation, equipment, and windows and doors. These are in the order of, I think that you should do your projects, your energy efficiency projects at your house, but then also I put them in order of the cheapest with the highest payback period. So air leaks, easy to tackle, doesn't cost that much. Important to do those first. Insulation, and so on and so forth gets more expensive as you go along. And again, remember, I'm going into these details so you can understand. I don't expect necessarily that you're going to be able to explain when you get a high bill complaint, that maybe you could call back and talk through some of these things or use some other tools to kind of help you with your customers to get some of these things addressed to have them have more control of their cost and be more comfortable in their home. So this is a great graphic. It's available energystar.gov. They have wonderful resources. I encourage you to go there if you want to learn more, or also your customers can go there and get resources. So when you think about all the air leaks in the home, I think most of us think about around doors and windows. Maybe that's because that's where we feel them more, but there's a lot of other areas that could possibly be leaking much more air. In fact, all the hidden air leaks in your house could equal a hole the size of an open window. So you can do a blower door test. Uh, I've had one done at my homes, a couple of my homes that I've lived in, and it's really great. It pulls the air through the house so you can really feel where those air leaks are. And a house that was built in 1948, my current house is built in 1929. Original windows, you'd think that they would be leaking a lot, but actually where all the air leaks were coming from was in other areas like what's called the sill plate, right between the foundation or the crawl space and the frame of your house. A bunch of air can leak through there, which kind of leads me to my next point. Anytime you have two building materials that meet, the foundation, the framing of the house, if you have things that you've drilled through those walls, like for dryer vents or outdoor faucets, that's all a place that air can leak in. You want to keep the air from cold air in the winter from leaking in, and then your conditioned air from actually leaking out. Recessed lights are another big air loss. So this is a good guide to help you kind of find where you should address those leaks, especially if you don't have access to like a blower door, professional energy audit. These are some good tips for your customers. This again kind of talks about where you would find those leaks. Like I said, where two building surfaces meet, floors, walls, attic. Ductwork can actually lose a lot more energy than windows. So exposed ductwork in an attic space, if you can seal that up and insulate it, you're going to be saving a lot of energy, as well as fireplaces leak tons. That's why we encourage customers to close their dampers when they're not using their fireplace, as well as some of the other things that we talked about. Good guide to where to seal those up. The other benefit of finding air leaks and sealing them up is that it will keep mice out of your house, it'll keep bugs out of your house. And so that's a good leading question too, if you want to ask a customer, do you have problems with insects, spiders, mice? That means that they probably have some holes somewhere where all of those critters are getting in. The great thing about spider webs, the one good thing about spider webs inside your house is it can show you where the air leaks are. A lot of times, this is kind of spider webs on steroids picture here. But a lot of times, if you see where the spider webs are, they might be right by a window or someplace where there is a crack that the air is leaking. So you can look for those spider webs to show you where you need to do some air leaks. And then the benefit of it is that you don't have to deal with the spider webs. We have a sunroom at our house that was converted into an office space, and it's probably been over 10 years since I sealed up some of those air leaks. And I noticed that the amount of dust and the amount of spider webs was really increasing this fall. And so we took some time to go back through and replace some of that caulk and seal up some of those leaks. So another benefit of fixing your air leaks is none of this nasty stuff inside your house. Lots of different stuff for fixing air leaks. Some suggestions for people who rent are you can roll up some towels, put it underneath those doors if you're leaking air under the door. There also make sand snakes, so you can make one yourself. It's basically a tube of material that's stuffed with sand and it fits underneath the door. Works like a wonder. I'm going to turn on my camera here real quick and show you something that's called rope caulk. And so this is something that we gave away as a giveaway at Columbia Water and Light. You can buy it for your customers or they can find it at their local hardware store or online. Basically, it's a removable way of, if you have leaky windows and that type of thing, it's made of clay or some kind of clay type material. So it's very malleable. Sometimes you have to kind of to warm it up a little bit, but you can put that in between, like if you have double hung windows, put that in between. The beauty of it is it's easy to remove. Definitely don't want to caulk windows closed because you might need to get out of them in an emergency situation. But there's some temporary things that you can do so you're not completely blocking that up. So this rope caulk is a beautiful thing, especially for renters or low income, very cheap thing to do. And then as far as sealing up larger cracks, like for instance, underneath, again, where two building materials meet, in between the patio door frame and the floor, there were some cracks there. This person is using caulk. If for some reason you have some cracks that are a little bit larger, which I definitely encounter at my house all the time, is they make something called backer rod. And this basically it comes in different sizes and you can push this into the crack and then caulk over it. And it gives you a better way of then having to come back and do layers and layers of caulk. So that's something to definitely look for at your local hardware store is backer rod. And then also you can use what I'm showing here, the spray foam insulation. Just realize that it expands on your quick plate. It fills in place is great. This is great for like sill plates and that type of thing. But wear gloves, make sure that your skin is covered because you do not want it to get stuck on your skin. I've done it before. You don't want it to happen. And there's some places where you might be able to actually use foam board that they use to fix or seal up new construction houses. Maybe on the sill plate or other places you might be able to use that. But the bottom line is sealing up air leaks is a great place to start. Almost anyone can do it, or have a handyman do it. Shouldn't cost too much to do that. All right, so once you seal up everything, then the next step is to add some insulation. So the important step is, though, to remember, because I hadn't really thought about this when I first started doing energy efficiency stuff, is that you really want to seal up those air leaks before you add the insulation. So what I look at it like is, say that, it's kind of chilly this morning, I put on a down coat. Well, if I didn't zip it, it'd be warm, but if I zipped it up and made sure it was fully zipped up, then I would stay a lot warmer because that air wasn't still leaking in. You're trying to create like a little cocoon. And so with that, do air sealing and then you're adding your insulation. This is another really good tip to tell someone that might have just a little bit of money to put this in. The payback on insulation is almost right away because you start saving so much money and your house is more comfortable. There's a couple of slides here. I'm not going to read all of them to you, but a good rule of thumb, a house built before 1990 probably needs to have insulation added, but it really goes back to what your building codes are and what the required insulation levels. I'd like to think that everyone building a house did the current recommendations for insulation, but that might not be the case. And here's basically some guidelines, especially the attic. Attics are usually the ones where people can get to and add insulation the easiest. If you have less than 10 inches, you need to add more. Talks a little bit here about ductwork. Again, the conditioned air that's going through that ductwork, you want to try to hold that temperature of that. So sealing it up and then adding insulation, especially if it's in an unheated or unconditioned attic or crawl space, that's going to make a big difference, as well as some other areas. that you need to pay attention to, like those rim joists that I talked about earlier. Different types of insulation. There's the fiberglass that you see there, and then you have cellulose that's a lot of times it's made from recycled paper. It's a good thing to be blowing into like walls, for instance. And then the best of all of them is spray foam insulation, although that's a lot more expensive. And obviously, as you can see in the picture, a lot harder to do after your house is already constructed. So, but it does double duty because it's doing that insulation, but it's also kind of sealing as it goes along. So spray foam is super cool, but not always possible. A good thing to share on social media is Roar Your Attic. There's a little graphic on EnergyStar.gov, kind of fun play on words. But put a ruler in your insulation, measure how much you have, and then tell people like what the recommendations are. The R value is usually, you'll see that mentioned a lot of times. That doesn't usually help people that much because they don't know that the R38 means 12 to 15 inches of insulation, but certainly add that to your outreach. But this is a great thing, for instance, in fall to talk about with your customers to add insulation, and even by showing them that you might want to put insulation in a floor above an unheated area, like say you have a garage with a bedroom on top of it. By providing this information, you're also kind of cluing them in on where they might need to have insulation. So good way of sharing. I just can't say enough about insulation. It helps with noise, it helps me be more comfortable, and it just saves so much energy. So I think if I were to, um, have the ability to get everyone to do one thing, it would be to have adequate insulation because it just makes so much sense. And so that's me and my soapbox there. Okay. So next up, and now we're going into, again, things that are a little bit more expensive. I consider these kind of more investments. Changing out heating and cooling is not going to be right for every one of your customers. It's expensive. It might take them a lot to be able to replace it. They might have to save up for a while, get some financing. So it's probably not, you need to be careful about telling, especially if it's a low income customer that's really angry about their bill, that they just need to replace their unit because that might not be a possibility for them. It might be a situation beyond their control. But if a unit is over 15 years and it's causing you a lot of problems, it's just not running that well, you really need to go ahead and get that replaced because again, over time it will pay back. You will save more energy. You can see up here in a picture of a unit that hasn't been taken care of, lots of rust. Can't really see it here, but a lot of times, you might have fins that have been crushed and so the air is not flowing through there. That fan's not working correctly. With a heating and cooling system, just like you want to keep the outside air out, but inside you want to make sure that there's no restrictions that unit, whether it's the outside unit or the inside system with your ductwork and the registers where the heat comes out, there's nothing blocking the system. And so keep your air conditioner and your outside unit, make sure that it's free of debris, clean out the leaves, don't plant anything too close. You want that air to flow through the system and you want to take care of it. Dirt and neglect are the top reason for failures and inefficiency. So, just like you wouldn't drive your car for a couple of years without having an oil change. Same thing. It's an expensive piece of equipment. Take care of it. It'll pay for itself in the end. One thing you can tell pretty much everyone is to make sure that they change their filters on their HVAC heating and cooling system. I have friends who have lived in houses for, I won't even, it's kind of embarrassing for them, 5, 10 years, didn't even know that they had a filter on their system. So don't think that anything's too basic not to share. So go ahead and let people know, change your air filters if you have pets. If you have a couple of dogs and a cat, you're going to probably need to replace that. Again, you get a clogged filter. It's going to block that heated or cooled air that's going through your system, make your system less efficient. So make sure you change the air filters. We have some different tips on that too, but that would be a really good one to do outreach on as well. And the other thing that's free, don't block the vents. A lot of times you see people that rugs over heating vents. You might see long curtains that are pulling along the floor, covering those up, or a chair or couch over it. Don't block any of the places where the heat's coming out or the air returns where the heat is circulating through. And then also, I suggest getting a tune-up by a professional. Once or twice a year is great before heating and cooling seasons. We did a pilot program at Columbia Water and Light, and we saw that I think it was around at least 10%, if not more. So again, it kind of pays for itself just to make sure that your equipment is running as efficient as possible. Okay, one more slide and a couple more slides on windows and doors, and then we'll get into tips and tools for your customers. The reason why I put windows and doors last is windows are really, really expensive, and you would think that they would lose a lot more energy than they do. But the average window energy savings with replacing windows is only around 8%. So again, you're looking at the cost benefit ratio. Air sealing is cheap, easy to do, not much labor cost. It starts paying back right away. Insulation isn't that expensive. It makes a big, huge difference. So start there before you start replacing windows. If obviously, if you only have one pane and the glazing's falling out, that your house is so out of whack that the panes don't line up and you can't even lock them anymore, maybe you should start considering it. But people a lot of times jump to the windows. I think it's because it has an aesthetic factor. You can actually see it. It's a little bit more exciting, I think, for people to have new windows than it is like, guess what? I just added insulation. So I think that's why people are drawn to them. And I have some old windows in my house that I would also love to replace, but I haven't done that yet. But I would do it for the aesthetic value, not for the fact that they're leaking a lot of energy. And doors, because you don't have as much, they can actually have a higher payback. And doors are where you're going to start seeing if you've had any shifting of your house, especially in new homes where they've just disturbed all the earth before building the home. You might see some light coming through, which means that generally air is coming through. But so there are times we're thinking about replacing our front door just because it's an old historic house. It's just a piece of wood, not that hefty, and just settling over the years, it's kind of impossible for me to fix the weather stripping and fix the problem. So that might be an area where I'm doing a energy efficiency upgrade by doing a door. But like I said, do the other things first. Do windows, do air sealing, and do insulation before you suggest replacing windows. All right, quick little tips here on things that you can do so you don't have to replace them. This couple here is they're replacing the weather stripping, and that can really help, especially again, if your door is settled over time, there might be a gap there. Just make sure your door is closed when you're installing the weather stripping so you can still close your door easily whenever you finish the project. There are tons and tons of different products out there to help you seal off doors and windows, not only along the side, but the bottom, especially the threshold is where you'll see things, lots of different replacement pieces for those. So I encourage your customers if they see that they can find some kind of easy do-it-yourself projects. And then also make sure that this is another good tip during really cold or hot times of the year for your customers. Lock those windows because they're going to have a much better seal. If they're locked, they're sealed as best as they can and keeping out all that air loss. And then also window coverings can have some insulation value. Another good tip for social media or your bills that's easy to do is remind people that during the day on the southern side, if the sun's streaming in, that can actually heat up their house. On a sunny day, keep those blinds open, let the sun stream in. You can have some of that solar gain in your house. But then at night, you definitely want to make sure those window coverings are closed because they actually do have a little bit of an insulation value. They sell insulated curtains or something with a heavier material like a velvet or something like that, or line curtains can actually help that air loss too. As well as all the different things we're talking about as far as, where two building surfaces meet, caulk along the outside of the frame where it's next to the building, both on the inside and the outside. replace windows, window stripping, feel it with your hand, feel where those leaks are. Use things like rope caulk or that type of thing to do some temporary sealing of those windows. But there are things that you can do versus spending a lot of money. So with that, thank you for paying attention and staying with me during that long, it's a quick little overview of some basic things. Again, I didn't go into some of the simple tips, but I'll show you where you can find those at MPUA.org. We do have those available. Most of those are self-explanatory, so that's why I kind of stuck with the bigger things. But in the winter, the basic concept is that you want to stop cold air from leaking in, so seal up those drafts. Stop heated air from leaking out. Air sealing and insulation help with that, as well as don't block the airflow from the furnace. Make sure you change your furnace filters. Don't cover up vents. It's a contained system that needs to keep that air flowing. Once the air starts getting blocked, your equipment's not going to run as well and it's going to be more expensive to run. And then take care of your equipment. It's a really expensive part of your house. Make sure you're changing the air filter and performing maintenance. And then again, the 3 ways to control heating and air conditioning use is lifestyle changes are free. It sounds like Jimmy Carter in the 70s, but put on a sweater if you're cold. Put a blanket on if you're laying down and watching a movie and TV or reading. Those things are free to do. And then there's lots and lots of low-cost do-it-yourself projects. YouTube is a great help for how to take care of those, as well as things like EnergyStar.gov. And then I realized that you're not going to be able to go through all of this with a customer on the phone, but you can kind of talk through, help them figure out where maybe they need to do some work, where they can help, how you can help them control their cost, send customers the tips. You can always, if you're a customer service rep and you're sitting in the main area, you can't necessarily go through a 15-minute conversation, maybe, and they maybe can't either. So set up a time to call them back and discuss it. Better yet, use consider things like the Apogee Project product, where you can do a home energy audit online, or assigning a staff person who's maybe interested in it, who can maybe do a simple audit of a customer's home and help them out. It really goes a long way. We're part of the community as municipal utilities. We're serving our hometown. They're our friends and neighbors. So any way that we can help them, especially with inflation being high these days, anything that we can do to help our friends and neighbors as public servants for our local utilities, the better. And if you need any tips on those kind of things, just please feel free to let me know. All right, so let's move into one of the more important things. I guess I should stop and ask, since I've been going for a little bit here, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm gonna keep on going, but please feel free to interrupt me if you want. And sometimes it's weird whenever you're doing a webinar for this long, you start feeling a little lonely, like no one's out there. But so anyway, feel free to interrupt me, add to it, ask questions as I go along. But here really is some of the meat of the presentation that you might find very helpful. Is MPUA has been working hard to get you more resources. If you have any ideas for resources to help your customers be more energy efficient, please let us know. We've been doing these tips. So you can go to MPUA.org, and I think it's under Public Outreach tab. You can find these tips. You can download them. If you want something customized, you can send us your logo, or I can send you the file to where you can add your logo to these winter home energy efficiency tips. We'll have more available in the summer. But as you can see, it's organized free ways to save. These are great ways too. You can take these kind of tips and put them out, whether it's in your bill inserts, website, social media, that kind of stuff. The other thing though is remember that not all of your customers, especially the customers that need it, might not have internet access, or might not be able to find it, or might not be thinking about it. So don't underestimate the power of paper handouts. So you can distribute paper handouts to low-income agencies, your community action, your health department, anywhere where someone might be going. I've put them on bulletin boards at laundromats before. anywhere where you can think of that people might have some time and be able to look at this information or pick it up and go home. The other thing is that the media is going to will be covering when the weather's severe. They usually have weather-related stories. That's the perfect time to send them your home energy efficiency tips and tell them that you'd be happy to talk to them about it. So you might get some free media coverage. That certainly helps. And new this year, Ashton Day on our staff. Thank you, Ashton, for putting together a social media kit. So you can download that again at MPUA.org, and it has not only the text you can use for social media or messages on your bill, but also the graphics. So one of the things we've been hitting hard, and I probably influenced this, but really, again, a lot of the things that I have seen where people just don't get it is that difference between the inside and the outside temperature. You're going to use more energy to heat a house. There's also some winter energy efficiency tips. You can use these on social media, have it linked back to all of your tips, but lots of good resources out there. If there are other things that you want us to do as far as education go, please let us know. One thing I also wanted to let you know about here at MPUA, part of our long range plan is to have more energy efficiency or demand response programs for our member utilities. So if you have interest in that, please let us know. At our March 2023 board meeting, we are going to be having a spotlight issue on energy efficiency and hearing about some different programs. So look for more resource from us later. The electric and gas market are changing a lot. There's a lot more stresses on the system. And as we've seen, more reliability risk this last couple of years. So we want to make sure that we're all prepared for needing to reduce our electric or energy use. All righty. So, okay. So, educational tools. These are things that not only you can learn a little bit more, or someone on your staff wants to learn a little bit more and maybe be your energy efficiency guru at your utility. Here's some good tool stuff that I suggest. One is quite simple, is if your billing system can do it, is providing consumption history on your bills. So people can look back and go, why is my bill so high? It's like, oh, guess every January it's high. I look at that stuff all the time on our bills. It really is something that I can kind of clue into, and especially we didn't really talk about energy related to water or anything like that, but I've caught water leaks before because I could see the usage going up. So the putting consumption history on your bills is a great thing to advocate for at your utility and have it as a goal at your local utility to get that billing that stuff on your bill. As I mentioned, EnergyStar.gov is a great way to educate your staff, but also your customers. There's also graphics and that type of thing that you can use. And then lots more than there used to be. Do-it-yourself videos on YouTube. They're very old, from some 15, 20 years old, but the conservation tips videos that we produced in Columbia are still on YouTube. They cover a whole bunch of different stuff. So anything from planting a shade tree to how to maintain your outside air conditioning unit to easy ways to seal up your sill plate, all sorts of different things. So there's a link for it there. And then one other thing too is consider partnering with your heating and cooling or insulation contractors. You guys are in the same space and have the same customers, and so they would be a great place if you do have some energy efficiency programs to tell them about them, so they can help, or maybe someone they might help by handing out your tips for being more energy efficient with your heating and cooling. But you can really be a good community partner, especially as you roll out rebate programs. Outreach. Talked a little bit about this with our social media kit and our tips, but I suggest finding ways to remind the customers of a chance for high bills before, and during extreme weather. So maybe in the fall, you might talk about fall's the great time to do projects in your house. That might include air sealing, adding insulation. But then times when you are actually going to be using more energy, remind your customers it's really cold outside, heating bills, it's going to cost you more to heat your house, and give them tips like where they have the thermostat set, making sure that their fireplace dampers are closed, that they're not blocking their heating registers. Those type of things are things that you want to do during the event. But in any case, repeat, repeat, repeat. Use every outreach thing that you can possibly use, as far as, whether it's messages on the bills, whether it's going and speaking to community groups, especially making sure that all the employees, not just the utility employees, but your city employees, understand about social media, or about energy efficiency. I just saw social media. And then, of course, with social media, use our tips or try something interactive, just so more people will see your post. That's the way the algorithms work in social media. So think of something where people would respond. What's your favorite way to stay cozy in the wintertime? And then you maybe start it by having some staff share something of, like, putting on a sweater and drinking hot chocolate or a warm cup of tea. Those are just some ideas. But basically, any way and every way that you can tell your story about being more energy efficient and helping your customers goes a long way. The American Public Power Association also has great resources on their website. And then, like I said, talk to your employees, because people are going to ask them about energy efficiency. So make sure that they're educated as well. Customer assistance resources, I just wanted to throw this in there to make sure that if you do have high bill complaints and people having a hard time paying their bills, make sure that you let them know about where they can find bill payment assistance. Have a good relationship, meet the people at your local community action agency. They're the agency that generally does the LIHEAP funds, so a good partner to have. But a lot of times they'll also have weatherization programs. If you can help with outreach with the weatherization programs, it will really help. They also might have days when they see a lot of people, they're signing up for winter funding or whatever. They might have a lot of people show up at their office. That might be a good day to have someone from the utility there talking, giving them free, handouts, whether it's an energy efficiency kit or just some information. A good day, good time to maybe reach that targeted market. And then reach out to every year or twice a year. Make sure you're updating your list of organizations that offer bill paying services or other social services that might help. Health departments, senior citizen groups, churches, civic groups. You might have a Kiwanis club or whatever civic club that you have, or organizations like the Salvation Army might be having utility assistance. So really make sure that you have those resources available for your customers to help them out. And I checked the website the other day, the SAFR program for renters. Looks like it's still up and running. That's utility and rent funds for low-income people that are impacted by COVID-19. So I have the resources here, but you can easily find that information online, and make sure your customers know about it, because the more you help them, the better off everyone in your whole community is. So let's get to the part of responding to customers. I'd love it if you guys would jump on and give me some of your examples, but here's basically just a few slides on some of the ways that I've talked to customers, things that I've found helpful when I'm talking to customers about high bill complaints. So again, you want to be patient with your customers. They just might not know a lot of this, especially after you hear it once. It makes a lot of sense. But if no one's ever told you about how energy works in your house and how you use energy, they might not understand. They might just think that they've placed all their light bulbs. They can't understand why their bill's so high. They just don't know how much energy different different appliances used and that kind of thing. So just be patient with them. I know it's really, really hard, especially when you get a lot of high bills, you get a lot of calls. Very hard to keep your patience, but just try. Take lots of deep breaths. And understand, I understand, you know, that there are a lot of things that can impact energy usage. But hopefully you can get them some information to make it a better situation. It's just like if something goes wrong with us providing utility service, you know, you look at it, if there's a way to keep that problem from happening again, you want to do that as a utility. Same thing for your energy usage. If you get a high bill, then learn from that and learn ways to get those costs down so it's not breaking the bank. So, you know this, if you talk to customers all the time, give them just time to speak and get their frustrations out. There's a lot of things that are weighing on people's minds, and especially when we've been dealing with cloudy, gloomy weather in Missouri, people have a tendency of getting depressed. It's after the holidays, all sorts of things. You guys know this, but just let them get it off their chest. Once they do that, I generally try to ask them kind of leading questions. So if you've ever seen a movie in a court scene, you know, objection, you're leading the witness. It's okay, you're not in court. You can actually lead your customers into an answer. So some questions that I would try to do would be I'm kind of educating them at the same time I'm asking them a question. So you know, they're going on and on about, you know, how expensive their bill is and all the other things going on in their life. And just say things like, you know, man, we really just got hit so hard with that cold weather at Christmas. I just couldn't believe it. How did your heater hold up during the extreme weather? This is just kind of a way of getting it to be more of a constructive conversation. So you've let them let go of their frustration a little bit, and now you're trying to find some ways to where you know what kind of tips you can give them. So, like I said, their answer can tell you a lot about their situation. You know, oh, 20 people were staying at my house over Christmas. Well, you know, realize that that's going to increase your bill. Hopefully it'll go down, that type of thing. So don't be afraid to ask questions that also educate. So if you ask them about where their thermostat was set, that's another way of you're kind of getting them to think about where their thermostat was set and how there is a relationship between that and they need to pay attention to it. So if for some reason, you know, they can't do a programmable thermostat, you know, just remind them any chance they have to turn that thermostat down when they're gone is going to help a lot. That way it's not as expensive all the time. A great tip I heard years ago from my friend David Mars at Columbia Water and Light, who's in those conservation tips videos. He had a great idea, and that was to set your car keys on top of your thermostat. And then that way, every time you left, you could remember to turn your thermostat down. So that's an easy tip to give someone. Like, hey, if you can't remember to do it and you're going to be gone for 10 hours at work all day, put your keys there. Then that way you'll remember to turn it up. Generally, you're cold when you get home, so you do remember to turn it back up. But little things like that help people remember to be energy efficient. And then, you know, ask them about things like space heaters. If they've been using space heaters, it could actually be a big, huge thing. You would think it's kind in a lot of ways it might be, people might think, well, how can a space heater use so much energy? They really can. So, you know, just ask them for any unusual activities. But if their bill shot way up the space heater, it might be that it's actually cheaper to use their furnace than a space heater, and they might end up being a lot more comfortable. And then, you know, also ask them how the best way is that you can help them. So can I send you information about free ways to save? And then again, knowing your customers, you don't want to talk to them about adding insulation or upgrading heating and cooling system if they told you that they're lost their job and they're about ready to lose their house and they can't keep up with their bills. Probably not appropriate to mention, you know, investments, but make sure that they have free do-it-yourself ways of keeping their bills in check. So here's one that I mentioned at the beginning. I never turned up my thermostat. So why is my bill shouldn't be more expensive? Again, the weather changes outside. To me, this is the number one thing that I think that everyone in this industry should say over and over and over again. The weather is what's causing your high bills. So anyway, again, consider using a programmable thermostat to lower the temperature when you're away. But then also, like I said, leave your keys on your thermostat so you remember to turn it down when you leave the house. And then I replaced all my light bulbs with LEDs, so my bills should have gone down. Now, this is something that really kind of gets on my nerves because yeah, I see articles all the time about like how to save on your winter heating bills. And it's like replace all your light bulbs. Well, that's going to save you money year round, so that's fantastic, but it's not helping with your heating and cooling. So really, again, if you're trying to help your customers reduce their high bills, then make sure that you're telling them things having to do with heating and cooling. And don't get me wrong, I love LEDs. I have them in my house. I think they're fantastic. They save a lot of energy, but it's not necessarily going to change those peak times when you're using a whole bunch in the winter. So again, they're important. They save you money throughout the years, and lighting can add up, but not as much as your heating and cooling system can. And then the ever popular one has nothing to do with me. It's the utilities problem that my bill was so high. So, um, I, at least when I worked for Columbia, I tried not to send a whole bunch of people out to check meters. But just remind them that overall, all of your customers had increased usage. And you can usually kind of look at what their usage was, if you can get into their account and kind of tell whether it's completely out of control or not, whether it was way out of the ordinary, in which case you might want to send a meter check out. Sometimes though, it pays to go ahead and send someone out because then they really do have the confidence that something is not working. Um, I also told them that, well, your meter has not been updated for a long time, so we can certainly come out and check it. But if we replaced it, you might actually find that old meters sometimes slow down over time. They usually don't speed up. Sometimes that stops them from having a meter check, but sometimes that's just what you need to do. And sometimes having that personal connection at someone's house, you can also, tell them when you're at their house, like, do you need some tips? Another chance for you to get some tips across to the customer if someone's going out and rereading and meter. And let's see, I think, oh, now I have some more. So, but feel free if you have some yourself and you want to interrupt me. My house is new, so it doesn't waste energy. Sorry, I wish that were the case, but as I said, a lot of times when you're building a house, you're moving a whole bunch of ground around, you're moving that soil around, fill it back in, it settles over time. So sometimes you can see cracks in the foundation or other things settle. You have more air leaks. So there can be problems with new construction, or maybe you had someone that built your house that really didn't care whether they did insulation or sealed things up. So, um, you know, if they have seen some cracking due to settling of their house, or they have issues with insects or pests, they probably need some air sealing. So probably air sealing and insulation. Their windows and doors are probably new. They probably have a new heating and cooling system, but have them check the air sealing for air leaks as well as the insulation, because not all houses, unfortunately, are energy efficient. Usually better, but not always the case. I think I mentioned this, but I didn't even turn on my heat. I just used a space heater. Space heaters can be really expensive. So depending on how often they're used, space heating can actually be more expensive than running a whole house unit. The other thing that can be a little counterintuitive, but in almost every occurrence that I know of, you can't close off a room to save energy. And it's in a way, maybe it's kind of counterintuitive, but again, you're thinking about when you have a system in your house, you want that air to be flowing through. Anything that's blocking that airflow could potentially lead to the equipment failing, or it's just not working the way it was designed. So you're still producing the same amount of heat. It's going to go somewhere, but a lot of it could potentially get lost. So, if you really do want to close off a part of your house, you probably should talk to an HVAC person and have them come in before you just randomly decide that you're going to close off a room. But it's not as easy as you think it would be to just start closing off rooms to save money. Now there might be other reasons that you want to do it. Like one room is too hot, so we kind of close the register a little bit at my house upstairs. But generally you want that air to be flowing through your system without any hindrances. And so closing off rooms isn't necessarily going to save you energy. All right. With that, that brings it to a close on the information that I had. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything here that we can do for you here at MPUA? Well, I want to thank you for attending today. Hopefully you found some of these helpful. We are recording this session, so give us a little bit of time. We'll get this loaded onto our YouTube channel and get that information out. I will, at the same time, I send you guys the slides. Anyone who registered the slides, I'll also send you the recording. So if you want any other information, please feel free to call me. Or if you have other ideas, like I said, for MPUA, some tools and things that we can do to help you help your customers, please let us know. All right, so if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and wish you a happy Friday and a great weekend. Thanks for joining us today.